November 3, 1944. The city of Metz, France, lay in ruins. What had once been a fortress town of stone and steel was now a labyrinth of rubble and fog. For weeks, the U.S. Third Army had fought street by street, house by house, against entrenched German forces determined to hold every corner. The weather was cold, the air thick with smoke and cordite. Every building had become a strong point, every window a potential firing position. By early November, American infantrymen learned to fear not just the enemy in front of them, but the unseen marksmen hidden within the wreckage. In the shattered remains of factories and apartment blocks, German snipers ruled the battlefield. They struck without warning, vanished into the mist, and left nothing but bodies and confusion behind. Among the units holding the line were teams of U.S. Army snipers, trained at Fort Benning, equipped with Springfield M1903 rifles fitted with 8x unertl scopes. They were skilled, disciplined, and deadly at range. But in the ruins of Metz, their training counted for less with each passing day. The men began to die faster than replacements could arrive. At first, officers believed it was bad luck or superior German marksmanship. But the pattern soon became undeniable. The enemy was using a method none of the Americans had seen before, a coordinated tactic that made every sniper duel a trap. One shot would draw attention, and before the Americans could return fire, a second unseen rifleman would deliver the fatal blow. It was efficient, it was merciless, and it was destroying the sniper corps from the inside. By the end of October, entire platoons had lost their marksmen. In the alleys and ruins of Metz, the U.S. Army faced a silent enemy that could not be seen and could not be predicted. Every time an American pressed his eye to a scope, it could be the last thing he ever did. The Germans called the tactic Doppelstellung, double positioning. To the men on the ground, it simply meant death. By the autumn of 1944, the Allied advance across Western Europe had slowed to a crawl. After the breakout from Normandy and the liberation of Paris, the U.S. Third Army under General George S. Patton pushed eastward toward the German border. The fortified city of Metz stood directly in their path, one of the last major strongholds protecting the Saar industrial region. Metz was no ordinary city. Its network of 43 forts, concrete bunkers, and artillery emplacements dated back to the late 19th century. The Germans had reinforced them heavily, turning every block into a miniature fortress. For the men of the 95th Infantry Division, the battle for Metz became a brutal lesson in urban warfare, close, personal, and unrelenting. In such an environment, conventional tactics broke down. Tanks struggled to maneuver through narrow streets clogged with debris. Artillery risked hitting friendly positions. Communication lines were unreliable. The battlefield shrank to rooms, stairwells, and corridors where a single rifle could dominate an entire sector. That was where the snipers came in. American doctrine at the time emphasized precision fire to suppress enemy strongpoints and neutralize machine gun nests. Snipers worked in pairs, one shooter and one spotter, operating independently ahead of infantry lines. They relied on patience, concealment, and coordination. But in Metz, those advantages turned against them. The dense fog reduced visibility to mere meters. The shattered architecture provided endless hiding places for enemy marksmen. And the city's multi-level structure made it impossible to control every angle. German units, many drawn from veteran formations of the Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS, used these conditions to perfect a deadly science. They studied American behavior, recorded firing patterns, and anticipated responses. The result was a countersniper network more organized and deliberate than anything the Allies had encountered in France. By late October, U.S. intelligence knew something was different. Sniper casualties were rising disproportionately across multiple battalions. Reports described American marksmen being hit from unexpected angles, often moments after engaging a target. The data was consistent, but the cause remained a mystery. The city had become a chessboard of invisible killers. Each move drew a response. Each response ended in blood. In the middle of this deadly equation stood one man, a 22-year-old sniper named Michael Donovan. The mystery was finally given a name: Doppelstellung, the German word for double positioning. It was not a weapon or a new technology. It was a tactic simple in concept, devastating in execution. Each German sniper team consisted of 2 men positioned between 30 and 50 meters apart, with overlapping fields of fire. The first marksman's role was not to kill, but to reveal himself. He would fire a single round, sometimes striking an American, sometimes deliberately missing. That shot was bait. Within seconds, every U.S. sniper in the area would focus on the flash or the sound, scanning through their scopes to locate the source. It was an instinct born of training and survival. Identify the threat, eliminate it, move on. But in Metz, that instinct became fatal. While American snipers zeroed in on the first position, the second German waited unseen, his rifle already aimed at the predictable response. The moment an American raised his scope toward the decoy, the second shooter fired. A single, precise bullet. One confirmed kill. The pattern repeated itself across the ruins of the city. In every engagement, the result was the same. An American sniper killed before ever seeing his enemy. The mathematics of survival had turned against them. The 8x untold scope that gave precision at long range now created blindness in close quarters. Through a narrow circle of magnified clarity, snipers saw everything except what mattered most, the angles outside their vision. In open terrain, this limitation was manageable. A spotter could cover blind spots, and the enemy's position was easier to predict. But Metz was not open terrain. It was a maze of intersecting sight lines and shattered architecture, where a single movement could expose a man to half a dozen unseen firing points. Every time an American pressed his eye to the glass, he sacrificed awareness for accuracy. The Germans understood this perfectly. They turned the very tools of American marksmanship into instruments of death. By early November, the U.S. Army had no solution. No adjustment in tactics, no countermeasure, no doctrine could break the pattern. For the snipers of Metz, looking for the enemy meant dying by his hand. It was in this environment, where every rule of survival had failed, that Private First Class Michael Donovan began to think differently. By the first week of November 1944, Michael Donovan had survived longer than most. He was 22 years old, a sniper with the 95th Infantry Division, stationed in the shattered center of Metz. His spotter had been killed 3 days earlier. He worked alone now, moving from ruin to ruin, searching for a way to fight an enemy he could not see. Donovan approached the problem not as a soldier, but as a technician. He understood that the German advantage was geometric. Each engagement was defined by angles, lines of sight that intersected and overlapped in three-dimensional space. The German Doppelstellung relied on the predictable behavior of its target, the act of focusing on one point to the exclusion of all others. The key, Donovan realized, was not better shooting but better vision. If he could somehow expand his field of awareness without breaking position, he could survive. The solution came from the simplest object imaginable: a 4x6-inch shaving mirror, the kind every soldier carried in his kit. Working by candlelight in the ruins of a bombed-out hotel, Donovan taped the mirror to the barrel of his Springfield M1903 rifle using strips of electrical tape scavenged from a field radio. He angled it at 45 degrees, facing backward, a crude periscope that allowed him to see what was behind him while looking through the scope. The concept was primitive but revolutionary. The main sight line through the scope remained unchanged. But in his peripheral vision, the mirror reflected the room behind him, the doorways, the stairwell, the side windows. It provided just enough awareness to catch movement from unexpected directions. It was not a complete solution. The mirror could betray his position by reflecting light, could shift under recoil, could fail at any moment. But in a battlefield where survival was measured in seconds, even one extra second could be decisive. On November 8th, Donovan tested the modification in combat. Positioned in the ruins of a bakery overlooking the factory district, he spotted a German sniper preparing to fire from a third-floor window. It looked like the usual trap, too easy, too exposed. Then, in the mirror's reflection, he caught movement on his flank. A second rifle barrel emerging from the rubble 40 meters south. The Doppelstellung was in play. This time, Donovan had the angle. He turned the rifle, fired once, and killed the hidden shooter before the trap could spring. Seconds later, he shifted back to the first window and eliminated the decoy. 2 German snipers, 5 seconds apart. The geometry of Metz had changed. That day, the mirror proved its worth. It was crude, improvised, and unauthorized, but it worked. Within 48 hours, word of the mirror rifle spread through the sniper platoons of the 95th Infantry Division. Soldiers scavenged reflective glass from wrecked vehicles and abandoned houses, taping fragments to their weapons in imitation of Donovan's design. What began as a single man's experiment became a field-wide adaptation. In the ruins of Metz, survival had found a reflection. The effect was immediate. Within a week, the modification spread through the American sniper units holding the northern and eastern sectors of Metz. What had begun as an improvised idea now became an unofficial standard. Soldiers stripped mirrors from abandoned vehicles, looted shopfronts, and even broken furniture. Anything that could reflect light was repurposed. The mirror became a symbol of survival, a field adaptation born directly from necessity. Reports from the front soon revealed the results. By mid-November, the kill ratio had reversed. Where American snipers had once suffered catastrophic losses, they now dominated the battlefield. For every Allied sniper killed, as many as 4 German marksmen fell. The Doppelstellung tactic, once a near-perfect trap, had lost its edge. German shooters found their ambushes exposed before they could fire. The second sniper, hidden in shadow, would reveal himself a fraction of a second too late, caught in the reflection of a taped mirror before his bullet left the barrel. The geometry of combat had shifted. The Americans now controlled not just the forward line of sight, but the flanks and rear as well. Snipers began setting up overlapping mirror systems using multiple reflective surfaces, allowing them to monitor full rooms while remaining motionless. German intelligence took notice. Intercepted reports mentioned unknown optical devices being used by American marksmen. Captured enemy soldiers described mirrors glinting faintly in ruined buildings, crude, improvised contraptions that gave the Americans what they called der zweite Blick, the second glance. Attempts to counter the modification failed. German units tried changing positions more rapidly or using multiple decoys. It made no difference. The mirrors had fundamentally broken the logic of Doppelstellung. As the Americans adapted, the snipers' survival rate tripled. Engagements that had once been certain death now ended in victory. Veterans who had fought through the early phases of the Metz campaign began training replacements with the mirror already taped in place. By the time the city fell in late November, nearly 3/4 of all U.S. snipers in the sector were using some version of Donovan's improvised system. It was never recorded as an official development. There were no orders, no blueprints, no authorization. But in practice, the mirror had become as essential as the rifle itself. It was an invention that did not exist, and yet it changed the outcome of the most dangerous urban battle the Third Army had fought that year. When Metz finally fell, the surviving sniper units were rotated out for rest and reorganization. Among them was Michael Donovan. He had fought continuously for 3 weeks, operating almost entirely on his own initiative. The mirror on his rifle was scratched, the tape frayed, but the principle remained sound. In early December, 2 officers from the Division Ordnance Department arrived to inspect the optical modifications. Their appearance was methodical, polished boots, clean uniforms, notebooks in hand. They photographed the rifles, interviewed surviving snipers, and recorded technical measurements. Donovan explained the origin of his mirror, demonstrating its function in detail. The officers listened carefully, thanked him for his cooperation, and moved on. 3 weeks later, a report reached Third Army headquarters. It described an innovative field adaptation demonstrating exceptional tactical ingenuity among U.S. sniper elements. The document praised the Army's commitment to flexibility and innovation. It recommended that the modification be standardized for urban combat operations and credited the discovery to interbranch coordination under division ordnance supervision. Nowhere in the report was Michael Donovan's name mentioned. The innovation was absorbed into bureaucracy, cleaned, categorized, and rewritten as if it had emerged from an official testing program rather than desperation in the field. A captain from Ordnance received a commendation for facilitating the development of an optical countersniper solution. Copies of the report were sent to Fort Benning, suggesting that similar modifications be incorporated into sniper training curricula. Among the men who had actually fought in Metz, the reaction was quiet but bitter. They knew exactly where the idea had come from. Some joked that Donovan should apply for a patent. Others suggested he write to Stars and Stripes. Donovan did neither. When asked, he simply said he hadn't built the mirror for credit or medals. He built it because he was tired of watching men die. Official history recorded the adaptation as a triumph of American ingenuity, a textbook example of how battlefield challenges inspired innovation. But in the official narrative, the names of those who had invented it vanished, replaced by unit numbers and departmental titles. The field report ended with a single line: recommended for future integration pending further laboratory evaluation. For the men who had lived through Metz, no laboratory was required. They already knew what it meant to see death coming, and how a small piece of glass had given them a fighting chance. Michael Donovan returned home in June 1945. Like thousands of others, he stepped off the transport ship without ceremony, carrying nothing but his duffel bag and the memories of a city that no longer existed. He settled in Michigan, took a job at a Ford plant, married, and raised a family. He never mentioned Metz. For decades, the mirror modification remained an anonymous footnote buried in after-action reports. It appeared in ordnance summaries as a field improvisation, referenced only in the passive voice. No name, no origin, just a notation that reflective surfaces had proven effective in sniper survivability during urban operations. To the Army, it was one of hundreds of small innovations that emerged in the chaos of war, untraceable, uncredited, and absorbed into doctrine. But among veterans, the story survived. In reunion halls and nursing homes, men who had fought in Metz spoke quietly about the mirror rifles and the sniper from the 95th who had first used one. Many couldn't remember his name. Some never knew it. But they remembered what it had done, how it had turned a death trap into a fighting chance. In December 2003, a curator at the National Infantry Museum in Fort Benning opened a new exhibit on battlefield adaptation. Among the artifacts was a Springfield M1903 with an 8x unertl scope. Taped to its barrel, cracked and yellowed with age, was a 4-inch shaving mirror. The placard read, "Improvised countersniper modification, Metz sector, November 1944. Origin unknown." Visitors walked past it without stopping. A few paused, curious about the strange attachment. Only the veterans lingered, standing silently before the glass case. They understood what it was and what it had cost. In the sterile light of the museum, the mirror still reflected. It showed faces, displays, and the endless movement of tourists, but not the man who had built it. His name remained absent, lost in the paperwork of a war that had swallowed millions. Yet the truth persisted, carried in memory and in metal. A mirror taped to a rifle in a ruined city, a fragment of glass that bought men 2 extra seconds of life. 2 seconds that separated death from survival, defeat from adaptation. It was not a story of glory or invention, but of necessity, of a soldier who refused to die according to doctrine. History remembered the battle. The records remembered the modification. Only the soldiers remembered the man.